The star was already tearing itself apart when the final evacuation order echoed across the Galactic Council chambers. Reports streamed in: radiation spikes, plasma eruptions, gravitational shear fluctuations, but they were all treated as cold, mathematical data points. The HFY homeworld sat at the center of an unraveling system, and every projection agreed the planet had less than 2 days before the flare front consumed it. No known shielding technology could withstand the storm, no conventional rescue craft could survive atmospheric insertion, and no existing extraction protocol could safely evacuate a species as fragile as the HFY under such conditions. The council members discussed probabilities, loss percentages, and resource expenditure without once acknowledging the millions of terrified lives on the surface. Their consensus came quickly: withdrawal. All fleets would pull back to minimum safe distance, and the HFY civilization would be recorded as a catastrophic natural extinction. After the vote passed, the chamber dimmed, screens shutting down as if eager to erase any evidence of the decision. In that moment, the HFY understood. Their transmissions grew faint, laden with the quiet acceptance of a species conditioned to endure rather than resist. They had never been warriors. Their bones could crack from the pressure of a firm handshake. Their nervous systems shut down under emotional strain. Even their voices trembled with inherent fragility. The universe had always treated them as delicate curiosities, pretty, harmless, and ultimately replaceable. Now, with death approaching, they did what they had done for centuries to survive confrontation: they submitted. Across the council floor, murmurs spread about the inevitability of the event. No one questioned it. Species whose ships could withstand black hole tidal forces claimed the rescue environment was too volatile. Species capable of manipulating spacetime claimed the timeline was too short. Even species priding themselves on empathy justified retreat with philosophical rationalizations about cosmic cycles. The idea of mounting a rescue was dismissed before it was ever truly considered. Then the humans spoke. They had remained silent during the entire debate, their representatives sitting motionless while the voting procession carried on. When the withdrawal order was finalized, the human delegates stood, adjusted the translator on their collar, and said in an unwavering voice that cut through the quiet resignation: "If even one HFY is still alive, the mission is not over." A wave of irritated disbelief rippled through the chamber. The term, Deathworlders, surfaced, as it always did when humans decided to do something reckless. To the other species, humanity was a paradox: soft-skinned, short-lived primates somehow evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every hour. No one could understand how a sapient species born from such a place could care so fiercely for life not their own. The council members called them irrational, emotionally compromised, incapable of accepting statistical reality. But humans were not arguing probabilities. They were making a promise. In the hours that followed, while other fleets retreated, humanity mobilized. Emergency channels pulsed with orders, launch timetables, and risk assessments marked acceptable where others would have marked fatal. Across the orbital arrays, Terran engineers began converting mining rigs into radiation-deflecting vessels. Rescue crews prepared for conditions that would liquefy most species' organs in seconds. No human hesitated. Some even volunteered knowing they would never return. The HFY did not understand it. Their faint broadcasts wavered with confusion more than fear. Why do you insist on coming? No one else will. The humans answered simply. Because you're still alive. That was all the justification they needed. While alien governments documented the HFY homeworld's countdown to destruction, the Terran fleet initiated departure procedures. Engines roared against the void as if defying the universe itself. Crews braced for the known dangers: plasma shockwaves, magnetic field inversions, regions of collapsing space, and the unknown ones yet to form. Humanity was the only species willing to step into the furnace. And they stepped in not for strategic advantage, political gain, or technological benefit. They stepped in because a gentle, fragile people had been abandoned by everyone else, and humans refused to accept that fate. In a galaxy governed by cold calculations, humanity made a decision that defied reason, probability, and survival instincts alike. They chose to try. They chose to hope. They chose to go. And for the first time since the crisis began, the HFY dared to believe they might not die alone. The moment humanity committed, the Terran Emergency Command shifted into a state of controlled chaos. Orders snapped through encrypted channels, summoning crews from deep space mining posts, orbital construction yards, and long-range patrol ships. Every available hull capable of thrust, shielding, or towing was reassigned. No one questioned the scale of the operation, they only asked how fast they could launch. The first challenge was the star itself. Its radiation output already exceeded the tolerance of most shielding systems, and conventional dampeners would fail within minutes inside the blast zone. Terran engineers developed a workaround within hours, the Aegis Net, a web of overlapping energy fields projected from an array of retrofitted industrial carriers. These ships were never meant for frontline work. They were meant to haul ore the size of mountains, not act as mobile radiation anchors. But humans had always been adept at turning the wrong tool into the right one under pressure. While the Aegis Net was assembled, another team worked on atmospheric entry solutions. The HFY homeworld's upper layers were destabilizing. Magnetic vortices twisted into violent spirals that shredded probes instantly. A normal drop shuttle wouldn't survive the descent. So engineers converted heavy mining containers into insulated descent pods with ablative plating, reinforced internal frames, and shock absorption strong enough to protect the fragile HFY. They were crude, ugly constructs, sealed with patchwork welds and untested under real conditions, but they were built fast, and built to last just long enough. On the ground level, rescue personnel trained non-stop. Simulations showed conditions deteriorating almost hourly, yet crews practiced each extraction scenario until muscle memory took over. Their suits were reinforced with layers of reflective polymer and adaptive field dampeners designed to handle temperature spikes and pressure anomalies. Every human who donned that gear knew the margin for error was razor thin. Still, volunteers kept coming. Pilots, medics, engineers, and civilian specialists submitted transfer requests before official channels could even process them. The alien observers who monitored the preparations reacted with disbelief. Where they saw a suicide mission, humans saw solvable problems. When presented with failure rates nearing certainty, humans treated them as obstacles rather than verdicts. Reports circulated that Terran Command had no intention of pulling back even if losses mounted, a concept so foreign to other species that some accused humanity of operating emotionally rather than strategically. Terrans ignored the criticism. They weren't planning a war, they were planning a rescue. Strategy had to serve compassion, not the other way around. Among the HFY, the effect was profound. Their transmissions shifted from despair to confusion tinged with something unfamiliar: hope. They struggled to grasp why another species would risk ships and lives for a people who offered nothing of material value. Their society had never been capable of such reciprocation. Their physiology made participation in galactic defense impossible. Yet humans did not ask for anything in return. They only asked how many needed saving. The fleet refits accelerated as the star's instability worsened. Engineers ran power conduits at unsafe loads, manually overriding safety regulators to squeeze every watt into the shielding systems. Teams slept in shifts under workbenches, waking only to resume soldering and recalibrating. Drone technicians worked side by side with humans, but it was the Terran personnel who pushed the final checks through sheer willpower. As the departure window drew closer, command officers reviewed each ship's readiness. Many vessels were marked as mission-capable by technicality alone. Radiation leakage warnings still blinked on several consoles. Hull stress reports flagged multiple weak points across the fleet. Under any standard protocol, half the rescue group would have been grounded. Under this mission, they were cleared without hesitation. Humanity didn't need perfect ships. They needed ships that could hold together long enough to reach the HFY. Before launch, a final communication was sent to the Galactic Council. Not a plea, not a demand, but a simple statement: humanity was proceeding with or without support. The message was met mostly with silence. Some species dismissed it as another example of human disregard for Rational limits. Others watched with a quiet unease born from respect. A few privately admitted they wished their own people possessed even a fraction of that resolve. The countdown to departure began. Engines roared as the rescue fleet aligned into formation around the Aegis net carriers. Each vessel carried the weight of a mission the galaxy had already deemed impossible. Yet among the crews, there was no fear, only grim determination and a shared understanding that they were attempting something no species had ever dared. When the launch command finally sounded, the Terran fleet surged forward. No hesitation. No second thoughts. No turning back. They were not chasing glory or political leverage. They were racing the clock to save a species everyone else had written off. Humanity had crafted its plan not because it was safe, but because it was necessary. And now they would test it in the heart of a dying star system. The fleet crossed the system boundary the moment the star released another violent surge, and every instrument aboard the Terran ships spasmed under the impact. Radiation alarms shrieked, electromagnetic readings spiked off scale, and several navigation arrays burned out within seconds, leaving pilots to rely on fallback systems designed only for emergencies. Yet the formation held. Each vessel adjusted with practiced precision, compensating for the gravitational distortions twisting through the region like invisible whirlpools. Within minutes, the micrometeoroid barrage began. Fragmented debris, some no larger than grains of sand, others the size of boulders, raced through space at lethal velocities. Alien ships would have retreated instantly under such conditions, but human hulls, reinforced with layered composites and radiation-dispersing plating, absorbed the impacts with gut-wrenching shudders. When a shard of iron-rich rock punched through a cargo bay wall of one transport, automated bulkheads sealed the breach before the atmosphere could vent fully. The crew inside did not slow their work. They had trained for this, expected this, accepted this. The plasma ribbons came next. They curled around the fleet like molten serpents, tendrils of superheated stellar matter hurled outward by magnetic shear. The Aegis net strained to repel them, its overlapping energy fields rippling as the plasma struck with more force than predicted. Shields flared, dimmed, stabilized, then flared again as power was siphoned from secondary systems to keep the barrier intact. Engineers rerouted current through manual overrides, ignoring the risk of overloads because hesitation meant death. Their hands worked fast enough to blister through gloves, but they didn't slow. One carrier, the Helios Gate, took a direct hit from a plasma bolt. Its forward array collapsed, energy surging through the ship like a lightning strike. The crew lost half their electronics in an instant. Instead of falling back, the carrier repositioned itself to block incoming debris threatening the ships behind it. With its shielding compromised, the vessel endured wave after wave until its hull began to glow red from thermal stress. Its final transmission before systems failed was a steady, unwavering message. Aegis line holding. The fleet advanced deeper, where the star's magnetic field fluctuations became erratic enough to twist compasses and scramble internal orientation. Gravity pulses tugged at the ships unpredictably, pulling them off course or forcing engines to burn at unsafe intensities just to maintain direction. Pilots countered each distortion with micro-adjustments, their movements sharp and instinctive. No one relied on autopilot. Automated systems couldn't understand a battlefield like this. Only human reflexes, shaped by centuries of adapting to a hostile homeworld, could keep the ships from spiraling into lethal drift. Through all of this, the XYR's faint transmissions echoed across the comm channels. Their voices trembled, not from pain but from disbelief. Every update they received defied what the galaxy had always taught them about humans. They had expected anger, arrogance, or heroic boasts. Instead, they heard calm reports, efficient updates, and quiet reassurances sent to keep them from losing hope. The XYR struggled to comprehend a species so terrifyingly resilient yet so disarmingly gentle. As the fleet approached the XYR world, the planet's condition became undeniable. Atmospheric layers peeled away in shimmering sheets. Cities flickered under power surges as the global grid collapsed. The planetary magnetosphere buckled in slow, tortured convulsions, unable to shield the surface from the storm. Every second brought new quakes, new breaches, new failures across the once peaceful world. Human sensors barely functioned within the interference, forcing crews to rely on distorted visual feeds and intermittent telemetry. Even so, they identified pockets of survivors gathered in sheltered structures whose integrity was weakening by the hour. Rescue teams synchronized the landing zones, analyzing environmental stress points and calculating safe, or barely survivable, entry paths. Then, a moment of absolute silence struck the fleet as the HFY transmitted a question so raw it pierced every channel. "Why are you still coming?" The reply came from a Terran commander whose voice carried the weight of everyone aboard every ship. "Because you're still there." With that, the fleet committed to the descent phase. Engines roared against the star's violent pull, shields flared under growing radiation assault, and every vessel pushed forward with a determination no calculation could measure. Humanity had crossed the threshold from danger into catastrophe, and yet they did not falter. They had come too far, endured too much, and carried too many hopes to retreat now. The HFY world awaited, and humanity intended to reach it no matter what the dying star hurled at them next. The first descent wave pierced the atmosphere as it buckled under violent thermal currents, and every craft shuddered from the strain. Heat washed over the reinforced hulls with such intensity that warning lights glowed continuously, but the pilots stayed locked on trajectory. Below them, the world was collapsing in real time, fault lines splitting open, structures imploding under seismic pressure, and entire regions swallowed by rolling clouds of ionized ash. The planet was dying, but there were still lives waiting. That was all the Terran teams needed to know. The moment the pods impacted the ground, the environment tried to crush them. Shockwaves rippled through the terrain, scattering debris across the landing sites. Rescue teams emerged quickly, suits adapting to the violent shifts in temperature and pressure. Their boots sank into unstable soil that pulsed as the mantle surged beneath it, yet they pressed on. They followed faint energy signatures and fragmented coordinates pinpointing the HFY shelters, fragile domes whose structural supports had begun to warp under constant bombardment. When the humans reached the first survivors, there was no time for introductions. The HFY were huddled together, trembling, their bodies so delicate that even the ambient vibrations caused visible distress. Human rescuers immediately lowered themselves to minimize the pressure their presence created, adjusting suit fields to reduce environmental impact. They spoke gently, guiding the HFY toward protective pods specifically designed to cushion their bodies from the turbulent surroundings. Many of the aliens resisted at first, overwhelmed by disbelief that help had truly arrived. A human medic simply reassured them, urging them forward with a voice steady enough to cut through their terror. Outside the shelters, the landscape deteriorated rapidly. Entire towers crumbled as gravitational distortions twisted their foundations. Atmosphere peeled upward in shimmering vortices, dragging particulate matter into spiraling cyclones. Rescue teams navigated these hazards with near-instinctive precision, coordinating routes through collapsing corridors and shifting ground. Their suits absorbed impacts from falling debris and deflected bursts of radiation that scattered across the surface like invisible shrapnel. The evac shuttles operated non-stop, lifting groups of HFY from extraction points and ascending through chaotic air currents. Each ascent was a battle. Updrafts slammed against hulls, and electrical surges overloaded sensors. Pilots relied on manual control, guiding their shuttles through turbulent layers until they cleared the interference. No shuttle left until every HFY accounted for was secured. Several pilots flew beyond exhaustion, refusing rotation until ordered by commanders who noticed their hands beginning to shake. The second wave of rescuers pressed deeper into the failing zones. The terrain grew worse the closer they approached the population centers. Walls bent under atmospheric compression, streets split open, and toxic vapors seeped from fractured conduits. Yet HFY still waited inside buildings moments away from collapse. Human engineers stabilized supports with emergency bracing rigs to buy precious minutes, while medics carefully lifted the frail bodies of the stranded. Some shelters were so unstable that rescuers had to crawl through narrow, twisting corridors as ceilings cracked over their heads. Even then, not a single human turned back until every HFY inside was brought out. One extraction nearly failed when a massive thermal surge rippled across the region. The wave flattened a landing pad moments before an evac shuttle touched down. Instead of retreating, the crew redirected to a patch of uneven terrain littered with debris. The landing was rough enough to buckle one of the skids, but they held position. Rescue teams sprinted through the storm carrying HFY cradled in their arms or strapped in cushioning harnesses. Suit exteriors blistered from the heat, but the rescuers didn't slow. They reached the damaged shuttle and secured the passengers just as another shockwave tore through the area, toppling structures behind them. As operations intensified, the planet's condition entered its final stage. Atmospheric instability became so extreme that air itself vibrated with a low, continuous hum. Rescue commanders announced last call extraction orders. Ground teams swept every remaining structure flagged by prior scans. Several humans gave up their own evac seats to cram additional HFY into the final pods and shuttles, relying on backup transports to retrieve them at the last possible moment. Those final minutes were chaos. Alarms echoing through the comm channels, structures disintegrating in cascading bursts, and the ground heaving violently as the stars approaching flare tugged at the planet's core. When the last shuttle lifted off, dust storms clawed at its hull, and the sky burned a furious red. Inside, the rescued HFY clung to one another as they felt the craft rising, leaving behind a world they thought would be their tomb. Their voices were soft, almost inaudible beneath the roar of engines, but filled with a gratitude so profound it left the crew momentarily silent. Humanity had promised they would come. And in the heart of destruction, they kept that promise until the very last second. The fleet broke away from the dying world with engines pushed to their limits, carrying thousands of HFY crowded into emergency bays, medical compartments, and makeshift shelters built during the flight. Behind them, the star unleashed its final flare, erasing the last remnants of the planet in a silent blaze that lit the void. For the HFY, watching that glow was like losing a piece of themselves. Yet layered beneath their grief was astonishment, because they were alive at all. The fact defied everything they had believed about the galaxy's indifference. Humanity had not merely intervened, they had done so at a scale and cost the HFY struggled to comprehend. As the fleet stabilized beyond the danger zone, medical teams immediately began assessing their passengers. The HFY had endured extreme emotional and physical strain, and their physiology reacted sharply to trauma. Humans moved among them with deliberate care, adjusting environmental controls to minimize stress. Many rescuers bore burns, radiation exposure, or injuries from the extraction, yet they hid their discomfort so the HFY wouldn't panic. Terran medics treated alien survivors with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the brutal conditions they had just escaped. The HFY observed it all with wide, trembling eyes, caught between mourning their world and grappling with the kindness of a species they had barely known. Meanwhile, the casualty list from the Terran side arrived with grim clarity. Ships that had held the Aegis net together were gone. Several descent crews had never reported back after their final sweeps. Some evac shuttles had been lost in atmospheric ruptures before reaching stable altitude. The losses were undeniable, but the human response remained steady. There was no celebration, no outward grief, no anger. Instead, there was a collective moment of silence broadcast fleet-wide to honor every fallen crew member. It was not a gesture meant to impress the HFY, it was simply how humans mourned, quietly, with respect, and with the expectation that their sacrifices meant something enduring. When the Galactic Council reconvened, the atmosphere shifted the moment the Terran fleet transmitted proof of the HFY survivors. The council chambers erupted with arguments, accusations, and frantic attempts to reframe previous decisions. Some species attempted to justify their inaction through strategic necessity. Others insisted they lacked the capability to intervene. A few claimed humanity's actions had been reckless and destabilizing. But none of those arguments held weight once the HFY delegation appeared on the screen. The HFY had no words of condemnation. Instead, they spoke softly about what they had witnessed. The moment humans descended through a burning sky, the way they shielded the fragile from collapsing structures, the calm instructions whispered even as the ground tore open, and the unwavering presence of Terran rescuers who refused to abandon a single life. They described hands that were strong enough to carry them through danger yet careful enough not to harm them. Their testimony cut deeper than any accusation could, because they were not speaking politically, they were speaking from astonishment and gratitude. The galaxy listened. Humanity's reputation as dangerous, impulsive Deathworlders did not fade, it transformed. The fear remained, but it was joined by something new, an understanding that humans were terrifying not for their aggression but for their refusal to let despair dictate outcomes. Their willingness to endure pain, loss, and impossible odds for the sake of another species defied the cold logic the Council had operated under for centuries. In the aftermath, the Terran fleet became a symbol of what the galaxy could be rather than what it had resigned itself to. HFY children, now refugees, learned to walk inside artificial habitats built by human engineers. Some drew crude starships on their walls, trying to capture the shapes of the vessels that had appeared above their crumbling sky. Human technicians worked beside HFY caretakers to establish stable colonies, ensuring the survivors could rebuild without fear of collapse once more taking everything from them. Among the memorials erected later, one inscription appeared repeatedly, on plaques, digital archives, and the interior hull plates of rebuilt ships. It contained no names, no dates, no political rhetoric. It simply stated, "They lived because we would not leave them to die." For the HFY, those words marked the beginning of a new existence. For humanity, they were a reminder of why they had acted when others turned away. And for the galaxy, they became an undeniable truth. When the universe offered excuses to abandon hope, humans chose to defy it.